Bill, talk about the area that you focus in the law.
Well, a significant part of my practice is in the mortgage business.
Okay.
And when we talk about the mortgage business, a lot of people are familiar with closings when they
Sure.
close a mortgage. My practice generally focuses on the lenders and that alphabet soup that we hear about, Truth in Lending Act, RESPA, TILA, a lot of the federal laws that you hear about on the television. Recently, the Dodd-Frank Act has really affected mortgage lending, and that's part of my practice too. So I represent the lenders in-state and out-of-state that make mortgage loans to consumers.
And you have a long history. Well, give us a brief example of your experience in the industry.
Oh, sure. I started my practice in 1989 when I graduated from law school, and that was in the middle of the S&L crisis. Before then, most home loans in the United States were made by savings and loans. With the S&L crisis, a new form of mortgage lending was created, and we have now what's called a government-sponsored entity, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac,
Okay.
and an entirely new mortgage market. So that's when I got started in the mortgage business, was when it started in its current form. And now it's going through another iteration with the new laws we have now. But I've been doing it in this type of environment since it started, really. So.
As Ben said, you've written a couple of books on this. You've testified in front of the Federal Reserve. Is that right?
Correct. North Carolina has some of the most progressive, aggressive, and effective predatory lending laws in the country. We were the first state to enact any of them, and I represented the industry in connection with lobbying those laws through our General Assembly. And they're pretty known for being the most balanced and effective ones out there. And the Federal Reserve asked me to come testify about those laws when they were enacted. That was probably about 9 or 10 years ago. Yeah, but we've had them for a long time, and North Carolina is going to lead the way again in changing the laws, I think. So
Okay.
we're in the middle of that process now.
Well, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No,
but
no.
Can you tell, what is predatory lending?
Yeah.
My view of predatory lending is when a lender or a mortgage broker takes advantage of a consumer's lack of knowledge. That's what I would say predatory lending is. There are a lot of more formal definitions. North Carolina has these standards and numbers, but in my mind, it's when anybody takes advantage of a consumer's lack of knowledge. And it's hard to define that in a law, but when we sit here and talk about predatory lending, some borrowers are more sophisticated than others, and so predatory lending with respect to them is different than a less sophisticated borrower, in my opinion. I mean, and I think I'm not alone in that.
So one of the topics that we can't get away from, that every morning when you watch the news or in the evening or pick up the paper or go on the internet, foreclosure. North Carolina's not insulated from that. You know, we're having a lot. So talk a little bit about that process and what happens. So a person out there could really be watching the show right now thinking, you know, I need this advice because I'm going through this.
Sure. Firstly, foreclosure is not the beginning of the process. Foreclosure is the notices from your creditor or from the court are kind of in the middle or towards the end. In my experience, a foreclosure isn't initiated for several months after the first or second or third installment payment is missed.
Okay.
So once a foreclosure starts, there is a real credit problem that already exists. So missing one payment, the foreclosure notice is not going to come the next week.
Okay.
It takes several months for it to get onto a foreclosure schedule. So that's the first thing that people should know.
If you miss a payment, are you automatically going to get foreclosed on?
Oh,
Or-
no, heavens no, heavens
Right?
no.
Yeah, I mean,
one of the important things that I like to tell people when they come to see me about this is the bank doesn't want your house. It just doesn't want your house. What the bank wants is a performing loan. And the next thing they want is for you to, if you can't make it a performing loan, they want you out of the house in an orderly fashion. I have people come to see me, and I think they have the impression that some kind of starship stormtrooper group is going to show up at their door and throw all their possessions in the street. That just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. It's a very civil, very orderly process. It's not very pleasant, but the idea of somebody swooping in and throwing all your belongings in the street and putting your family out on the street within a short period of time just doesn't happen.
So what do people do when they're facing a situation where they've got a financial problem? Let's say they feel like they can't pay the loan or they're behind. What are their rights? What can they do?
Well, the first thing I would advise anybody in North Carolina to do is North Carolina has one of the best foreclosure prevention agencies in the country.
Oh, really? Okay.
North Carolina Foreclosure Prevention, I think, is fairly simple to find. It's run by the North Carolina Commissioner of Banks.
Okay.
The people there are very knowledgeable about rights. They have special telephone numbers. They have a way to talk to creditors that lots of lawyers and even individuals don't have. So they have really good access to quick information, and that to me would be a good place to start. The second thing that is appropriate is to call the creditor and tell them that trouble is coming or trouble is there. It's okay. The creditors, the big ones that you hear about, especially the government entities that own loans, they have programs set up to deal with trouble, with people that are having financial trouble. And it's good to get into those programs. These programs take a long time to work through. So the earlier that a person gets in them, the more readily you can find a response and figure out whether you are going to be able to stay in your home or not. So the first thing to do is call the North Carolina Commissioner of Banks and their foreclosure prevention program. And the second thing to do is to find your creditor and tell them that you're likely to miss a payment.
You might have a lot of questions for Bill, and certainly we will want to address that, because you can call the Whitley Law Firm and they will direct you to how to get in touch with Bill. Bill Bost is joining us in studio, who practices law in the area of home mortgages. So another question I had is, a person is in trouble like that. Can an attorney help them through this situation?
Sure. My experience has been that a lot of the correspondence that comes out of the government entities and lenders is unintelligible. It's unintelligible to me. I know that people that aren't used to dealing with it have a hard time dealing with it. So lawyers can help translate. The other thing that is very apparent is that lenders, and we've read about them. We've read about robo-signers and people that aren't following the rules. A very effective lawyer can require a lender to follow the rules. There are a lot of rules that are in place to protect homeowners and consumers. This scandal that we've read about for the last several months involving these large lenders, they're just running over the rules. And those rules are there to help consumers, and a lawyer that is versed in this stuff can really make sure that all the protections that are provided to consumers by our laws are afforded to consumers. Lawyers can be very effective.
Right. When you said that the bank really doesn't want your house,
correct.
Why is that? Because it's just a hassle for them. They're going to lose money on it. When you said they just want a performing loan, what you mean by that is they just want their payment to come every month, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Well, banks are not set up to be property managers. They're not set up to be landlords. They're not set up to mow grass. They're not set up to rent houses. They're set up to lend money and collect payments. That's what they're there for. In addition, foreclosure is expensive. And so if a house goes into foreclosure, almost by definition, it's a loss. A performing loan, even if a few payments are missed, is much better and more efficient for their balance sheet than a foreclosure in almost all circumstances. So when I say they don't want one, they would much rather have a performing loan for profit reasons. It's just a better deal for the bank.
We're going to take a short break, but you